Welcome, everyone, to this Youth4Disarmament forum panel on the destabilizing effects of AI and cyber technologies on nuclear stability. Thank you for joining us today, both in the room and online. My name is Umi Ariga. I am a research fellow at the Japan Institute of International Affairs, where I cover emerging technologies, and I'll be moderating today's panel session. First, I would like to thank the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs for organizing today's discussion, together with the Republic of Korea for supporting the Youth4Disarmament initiative, which provides a unique platform for young leaders across the globe to engage directly with global disarmament issues. As we know, rapid advances in AI and cyber are reshaping nuclear command and control and introducing new risks, but they also hold potential for improving early warning and risk reduction. Our aim today is to explore those trade-offs, how AI and cyber intersect with nuclear decision-making, and what practical measures can reduce risk and strengthen stability. Additionally, I'll be asking each panelist to keep youth perspectives in view as they speak, so briefly noting what the insights imply for early career practitioners and for youth-led contributors. Before we start, a quick house rules to keep us on time and to make space for everyone. So each panelist will have 5 minutes to present, and then other panelists will have about a minute to comment and build upon the presentation. We'll take the Q&A at the end for about 30 minutes, so please hold your questions until then. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Dina Tawfik. She's a former research fellow at the Center for Energy and Security Studies, and currently she is a PhD candidate at Lund University in Sweden, where she conducts research on Middle East nuclear politics. So our question for you, Dina, is the integration of AI into NC3 is often framed as a pathway to greater speed and precision in decision-making. But when it comes to systems as consequential as nuclear command and control, those same qualities can introduce new layers of uncertainty and risk. So how does the integration of AI into NC3 reshape risks and decision-making? And what does that mean for the balance between technological advancements and human judgment?
Sometimes the difference between war and peace can be a single human decision. To give a little historical anecdote, in 1983, an early warning system by the Soviet Union detected 5 incoming US missiles. And the Soviet officer on command stopped to ask, if this were a real attack, would the US only send 5 missiles? So it was his human judgment that prevented nuclear catastrophe. And this begs the question, can AI doubt itself? And can it take into consideration context that can be key to decision-making? And how well can it adapt to novelty in situations outside of its training data? This example also underscores AI's limitation in predicting human intentions that shape or influence nuclear decisions, such as signaling, deterrence, and the analysis of the credibility of threats. In 2024, a study on fictional nuclear escalation scenarios found that AI tends to choose more escalatory options than its human participants. Now, of course, this example is an old one, and AI, of course, is getting better over time, but that also introduces new risks because AI cannot grasp the emotional gravity of what is at stake with nuclear war, and that could be simply because it lacks human empathy or it doesn't abide by the our social norms, such as the nuclear taboo. And human judgment matters because as long as humans are in the loop and as long as they are in control, then there can be accountability. But the introduction of AI in nuclear command, control, and communications, NC3 hereafter, is changing that. Other risks associated with the introduction of AI in NC3 is algorithmic opacity, which is the lack of transparency or understandability of how certain algorithms make certain decisions or come to certain conclusions. And there's also automation bias, which is the tendency of users to accept system output without critical scrutiny. And the way in which AI can sometimes present its information can influence decision-making towards more escalatory options. Another risk associated with AI is that its distinct military characteristic, its distinct characteristic, is that its military applications are often invisible until they're deployed. But perception can matter as much as reality. And a perception gap can mean that adversaries might not know whether certain capabilities are aspirational or operational and to what extent, and that could lead to an arms race because automation and AI across all military systems, not just nuclear, also conventional, can increase the vulnerability of nuclear forces. And this perception can do two things. One, it can pressure nuclear arms states to strike first in a crisis to protect its second strike capability. And two, it can lead to the proliferation and diversification of their nuclear forces. But the good news is there are things that we, especially as youth, can do to reduce nuclear risks. And that begins with a shift in the mindset about the roles that we can play or should play in this domain. My own personal interest in this began in a university classroom on nuclear politics, which really helped me connect the human to the technical. And it gave me the awareness that I am a stakeholder in nuclear weapons and in AI. And it struck me as it was quite striking how easily that awareness could have remained out of reach and can remain out of reach from so many people. And so my first recommendation would be to mainstream disarmament in AI education across educational institutes, such as schools and universities, to help people understand their roles as stakeholders. And the very term stakeholder is quite heavy, and that's why most people don't really associate with that term in the nuclear weapons domain. And that can partly be because of where these debates are confined and where they're had, and how they're often framed as the preserve of a narrow expert community. And my second recommendation would be for states to recognize AI as a shared responsibility and to establish shared rules for responsible AI and to establish red lines. And my final recommendation would be to codify the primacy of human agency and oversight, not just in launch authorization of nuclear delivery platforms, but also in providing the right conditions or maintaining the right conditions for humans to continuously input their intelligence gathering, analysis, and communications. So to close off, AI is not just AI in NC3 is not just a technical question. It's very much a human one. And the real question isn't how well we can make machines think now or in the future. It's about whether we can keep thinking and choosing for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina, for your presentation, and especially for highlighting the human aspects of the control of AI and the impact of AI into NC3. Would anyone on the panel would like to offer some comments on Dina's presentation? Okay. If not, I think we can move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Mr. Giacomo Persi Paoli. He's the head of security and technology program at UNIDIR and an expert on AI and cyber implications for peace and security. So, Giacomo, there's often lots of hype around artificial intelligence in the security field. But from your perspective, what's the real state of AI today? What can it actually do? And what should we still be cautious about when we think about its applications to nuclear and military systems?
Thank you, Umi. And good morning. It's really great to be here and to have the opportunity to engage with you all. When I looked at the question, try to help all of us navigate a little bit this kind of wave of hype that surrounds AI, I think it's we're kind of asking or focusing a little bit on the wrong question, because in a way, in the world of AI, if we've been terrible at predicting things, and particularly we've been terrible at focusing on the short term. You know, we've always thought that whatever capability looked at the future was very far, and we've consistently underestimated the speed of development of artificial intelligence. And this is, you know, since the ChatGPT entered into the market, we always thought that, okay, well, it's going to take 5 years to achieve this level of capability, and then 2 years later, that capability was already there. Maybe not at full potential, but the early steps into new generations of AI have been much faster to come to the market than we anticipated. And this is a result of many factors, a lot of investment, of course, a lot of kind of market-driven interest in different sectors, a lot of data, potentially relatively weak governance that kind of allowed or generated an environment that in a way enabled innovation. But in any case, we've been very bad at predicting when the next generation of AI will come into play. And this, in practice, has translated into kind of the time horizon being compressed and compressed even more. So I just have 3 dates I want to share with you. Now, because one person cannot really guess where AI is going to be in the near future, luckily, there are some surveys out there of scientists and AI experts that have been trying to answer this question. Now, if we look at today, where there seems to be a little bit of convergence as to where the first generation, they call it like the weak artificial general intelligence, is going to land on the market. We have a date. I don't know if you want to mark it in your calendar, and then we'll meet again, see if it's true or not. But it's the 28th of August, 2027. Now, it might be a week before, a week later, a month before, a month later. It doesn't really matter. But what this tells me is that we're not talking about 2045. We're talking about 2 years from now, which isn't really that long, particularly if we put it in the context of UN timeline, right? So August 2027 is basically tomorrow when it comes to thinking about generating any type of new kind of UN mechanism, UN having states come to around the table, agree on an agenda, agree on how to go about things. And if weak artificial general intelligence isn't probably scary enough, what is interesting is, okay, well, how long would it take from the moment that the first weak artificial general intelligence is released to achieve what they call like Oracle, so a more sophisticated level of artificial general intelligence, one that by definition can answer any questions better than any and all humans combined. And one may think, okay, this must be like a 2050 type of problem. It's actually 22.2 months after that. So it's less than 2 years. So we're now suddenly finding ourselves in 2029 facing with a technology that potentially at the intellectual level outperforms all of us combined. So this is where the direction is going. And if that wasn't sufficient enough, I have one more date to share with you of artificial superintelligence, something that until a few years ago belonged on the books, on science fiction books, and on like scripts in Hollywood, and everyone would like have a laugh at experts that were talking about this concept. Well, the definition of artificial superintelligence can vary, but there are fundamentally two. One more in the cognitive space. It's referring to basically recursively and self-improving AI that basically can learn from itself and experience, meaning doesn't need that much past training data. It can learn by doing, and it can reprogram itself. That is more on the cognitive space. But then also in the field of robotics and physical systems, we're looking at an artificial intelligence that can, when applied to robots, basically to robotics, can outperform humans in kind of the 3 things that make us good, which is locomotion, so moving around, proprioception, so our understanding of how our body interacts with the physical environment, and dexterity, so our ability to do the manual things. So that is 32 months after weak AGI, so less than 3 years. So we're looking at 2020, again, 2029 as a timeline. Why am I saying this? It's because we tend to have, when we're looking at the impact of AI on international peace and security, whether it's in the nuclear field or in other fields, we tend to look at it through the lenses of what we understand today and what we think that AI today is and is capable of doing. And in a way, today is already in the past when it comes to artificial intelligence. So if we really want to become proactive in trying to build governance frameworks, red lines, or anything that has to do in relation to artificial intelligence in international peace and security, we have to look at the future, because we know that by the time we get there, the technology will have advanced significantly. And it is in this context that when I'm looking at the issue of AI in nuclear decision making, yes, there is the obvious path of agentic AI or delegation of key decisions in the nuclear command and control kind of chain to artificial intelligence, and that's bad, of course, for a variety of reasons. But I think that's also relatively easy preventable, because all it takes is to agree that we're not going to delegate the final decision to launch to an AI system. That's not saying that it's politically viable, but it's definitely easy to understand the problem that we're trying to prevent. Where I think it's a little bit more difficult is kind of the less obvious and kind of half-hidden integration of AI into the overarching processes that surround and assist final decision making. Whether even if those remain, within kind of the human control, the human oversight, the human agency, if those decisions are poorly informed by AI systems that feed wrong data or interpret wrong data, or can be subject to adversarial action in terms of data spoofing, in terms of cybersecurity, etc. That risk is potentially as consequential as the risks deriving from delegating to AI certain decisions, and also more difficult to capture, to manage, and to avoid. So I think it is important to look at this question very very thoroughly, and focus also on kind of the second and third layers that surround the final decisions to deploy nuclear weapons, to really understand the extent to which AI is going to be diffused in support of all of these processes and what risks can come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paoli, and thank you for your answer and for the sobering reminder that progress in AI will not wait for UN decision making and for member states to reach consensus. Will anyone on the panel would like to comment? Yes.
I'll come over here. Oh, sorry, I just didn't see that. Sorry about that. Thank you for your insight into this. This was very interesting to hear your perspective on it. I think, let's see how I can get to the question. What I find struggling here is that we've seen in other fields that the industry has used AGI to circumvent discussions about regulation at the time. So how can we make sure that we don't fall for a debate which keeps us occupied for several years and miss the point of regulating right now the effects?
No, I think you're right. But if we've seen, if you've been mapping a little bit how the debate has evolved, what we've seen is that at the beginning, and when I say the beginning, basically, I mean in the early months and years right after ChatGPT was announced to the world, we saw there was the kind of existential risk movement that was very, very loud. There was even a letter calling for a moratorium on stopping the development, et cetera, et cetera. Then that debate, in a way, kind of almost went silent for a little bit. And I don't think that there is anyone right now in industry that is really pushing to bring AGI back on, to occupy the policy debates. We see, for example, recent Sam Altman, for example, that is now trying to come back a little bit on the whole issue of AGI. I don't think that there is that policy development and regulation. Let's call it governance, because regulation comes with a very kind of a hard or loaded kind of meaning. I don't think that AI governance should ignore today to focus on the future. But what I think that AI governance should do is do not only approach the problem of that AI and the AI risks problem and the mitigations that are required only through our current understanding of what AI is, without really talking to the people that are developing that can tell you where AI could be and could go. I think this for me is an important step and an important reason why the policymaking community and the multi-stakeholder community made of academia, of science, of civil society, and technology developers should really have more meaningful engagement, at least to start talking about the same language, right? Because when we're coming to, for example, agentic AI, that is not the future, it's kind of today, is today's issues. We're talking about AI agents interacting with each other, for example, and I haven't seen in the policy community anyone really thinking about how do we deal with, can we think of developing norms of behavior that can regulate interactions between AI systems? Like, these are the sort of questions that would be very interesting to have. But I agree with you that we shouldn't look at the moon and in the meantime, everyone is doing whatever they want with today's AI. I really agree with that.
Yeah, maybe on this particular point, I think it's not an either-or type of question. You can look at AGI-related questions and try to find answers to that from a precautionary principle, but also you could look at the current issues and try to mitigate the risks that happen today. So I really do not buy in that debate that took place last year or so about, let's not focus on existential risks or AGI because it just takes away the notion that we should address the risks today. At the UN, at least, we always talk about the existing and potential risks. So that needs to be taken on board. I think the problem here is that the AGI community generally overestimates the risk, and then the other part of the community underestimates the risks. So we end up with overestimators and underestimators, right? And probably the answer sits in between of those two. So we need more of that approach. Where is the middle ground that we can agree on the type of risks and mitigation of those risks? One point that I just wanted to make actually about those you gave all those numbers, 2027, 22 months later, and so on. And I was thinking, why do humans are so bad at this? It's because we think linearly, right? I think that linear thinking that humans have is just putting us into trouble because innovation does not take place in a linear way. It's exponential. It happens in bursts. And what is interesting, I think, is that an area that we see innovation taking place could actually shape something else completely different, right? In another area. That convergence is actually creating that burst. And I think that's why we're looking at those very short time frame scenarios. Thanks.
All right. So on that note, Dr. Bezonal, you are our next speaker. So Dr. Bezonal is the head of UNODA's Science and Technology Unit, where she leads work on emerging tech and their impact on international peace and security. So Beza, your work sits at the intersection of emerging technologies and international security. So how do AI and cyber risks interact when it comes to nuclear command and control systems? And what kinds of measures or norms could help mitigate those combined risks?
So on the convergence of cyber and AI with nuclear weapons systems, I'll just start maybe on the cyber side. I did research on this a long time ago. Now, we know that nuclear weapon systems, and I'm not talking only about nuclear command and control systems, that's often what's been thought of, but also networks that enable nuclear weapons, such as permissive action links, PALs, can be subject to malicious interference through cyber means. Now, what type of cyber risks that we're seeing in that regard, or what type of cyber risks that we talk about? It could be system-level vulnerabilities. for instance, backdoors in hardware, software, or firmware. And those backdoors could actually be put just on purpose for patching purposes. It doesn't have to be for malicious purposes. It's the manufacturers actually put backdoors all the time to technologies in order to update that technology in the future. But the adversarial actors could also use those backdoors to infiltrate into the systems. It's also, we're seeing again at the system level, the use of outdated software applications being used in critical infrastructure, but also on weapon systems as well. The main issue in here is that from the time a product is being procured or contracted to the time that it's actually being integrated into the weapon system, a lot of time passes because the military, the technology innovation is really fast, but the integration to the military systems is quite slow, right? So what we see is those systems being required security updates the moment they are being integrated into the system, and such integration could be neglected. States may not consider that because it's just a newly purchased item, and so on. Another vulnerability that comes from that is the supply chain vulnerability. That supply chain, especially when it comes to the chips, actually, in chips industry, because nuclear weapon systems rely on chips. If it is outsourced from a third party or a third country, then it requires much more auditing and securing and so on. And not every country has the same level of work around these things. Some nuclear weapon states actually do not outsource their chips. They do that in-home, in the house. So that would, for instance, reduce a little bit of the risks. We could also see physical security issues, insider threat-related problems that is linked to cyber or operational vulnerabilities as such. Now, this is quite a sensitive topic. So when and if you look at newspapers, you would never hear actually about actual cyber attacks happening to a nuclear weapon system. We often hear about human errors. And I often ask myself, what if this could have been a technical error rather than a technological error rather than a human error? Human is always being involved in one parameter, but we often hear things that this is a human error. So we need to ask ourselves, what if it was a technological or technical error? What could have happened? Or you need to also look at official reports and published audits from nuclear weapon states. That would also give you an idea that this is an area of growing concern. Now, on the AI part of the equation, Giacomo mentioned about agentic AI. And this is quite interesting because we are seeing the combination of cyber and AI being like playing in here a little bit. And specifically, if you're thinking about nuclear weapon systems, the worry here is about reduced timeframes for decision making due to the machine speed of analysis of threats. It accelerates the decision timeframes, the decision-making timeframe, to a level that it can outpace human cognition. Now, I should have also made a caveat. In all of these discussions, we're talking about potential integration, right? We do not know that AI is being integrated into nuclear command control communication structures. We know, however, that in the process of nuclear decision making, there are areas that AI could have been integrated, such as for threat identification purposes, for early warning systems, for intelligence gathering purposes, even for logistics, for maintenance purposes. So there are areas, on the background that AI could have been integrated into. I have a lot to say, but I know that time is short, so I'm gonna just jump to the last part. On the agentic AI, I think what we are seeing is AI becoming more adaptive and persistent to to the environment that it's in, and it conducts more probing that a human cannot do in real time. We're also seeing increased autonomy in actions of artificial intelligence, integration of artificial intelligence in cyber operations. That could, for instance, lead to autonomous reconnaissance activities that would not require any human input for a very long time. It could go through the servers, through the networks, receive all the information, find all the vulnerabilities that are out there in the network. And this is quite worrisome for nuclear weapons related issues. It is worrisome for critical infrastructure. It is worrisome for other weapons technologies. But when it comes to nuclear weapon systems, it's really the consequences that will cost us as humanity that becomes the main worry. In conclusion, I think emerging technology risks raise significant doubts as to the reliability and integrity of nuclear weapons systems in a time of crisis specifically, and regarding their ability to launch a weapon, prevent an inadvertent launch, maintain command and control of all military systems, transmitting information and other communications, and the maintenance of reliability of such systems. Now, what to do about this on the norms side? One of the items that Giacomo also mentioned is a political declaration of some sorts, or an agreement could come about in terms of not to integrate AI into nuclear decision making. Verification of that would be very hard, at least at this point in time, with current technology. But technology advances, so there could be technological approaches that could come about in terms of verification in the longer run. And I would say that from the UN perspective, the use of possible multilateral fora, every multilateral fora, from NPT to the AI discussions to the cyber discussions, is quite critical to advance, for us to advance in this field. Thanks.
Thank you, Beyza. Would anyone on the panel like to react? And for the sake of time, let's keep it to comments, and let's keep questions at the end. So if anyone has comments, yes, please.
Yeah, just really quickly, I wanted to come back on that point of sort of linear thinking and convergence, because I think what we also tend to do when we think about these nexus topics like AI and nuclear weapons, emerging technologies and nuclear weapons, we tend to think in these silos. So we then only focus on AI and nuclear, cyber and nuclear. But I think what the complexity, where the complexity really comes from in today's environment, is that AI is also converging with other technologies around it. So we really need to look at AI, advanced sensors, space technologies, and how they interact and amplify the impact on the entire nuclear weapons enterprise. And that's not only the weapons, but it's also the humans that work in the system, and sort of really try and identify in this complexity where the vulnerabilities sit in today's environment.
Thank you. Well, that's a perfect segue into our next speaker, Ms. Patricia Yaurek. So she's the director of the Nuclear Threats Initiative's Global Nuclear Policy Program, where she focuses on arms control, Euro-Atlantic security, and the NPT. So Patricia, how are discussions on AI and cyber risks being integrated in the NPT context, and what opportunities or challenges do you see for addressing those technologies within existing multilateral mechanisms?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks again for having me on this panel. So I think there's a bottom line where in sort of multilateral processes and sort of these multilateral nuclear treaty regimes, I think we're seeing seeds of discussions emerge in the last 4 to 5 years, I think, on that topic, to varying degrees of depth and sort of the forums that are used for that. And I think the focus has been mostly on very particular topics like human control and protecting nuclear command, control, and communications, NC3. So I think it's been noticeable that this issue and the concern in the diplomatic community is growing, but I think it's still in the early stages. So that's the bottom line. I did want to mention a couple of milestones I think that are worth mentioning in the NPT context in particular, and that, for example, at the 2022 NPT review conference, the consensus outcome document, the draft text, was ultimately not adopted, but NPT member states did call for intensified dialogue between among nuclear weapon states and then between nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states on sort of this issue, on the implications of emerging technologies under the disarmament pillar of the NPT and more broadly. And even though I think the document wasn't adopted in the end, that sort of signals growing awareness on that issue, and it set the tone for this review cycle. Also in 2022, the P3, so to speak, the US, UK, and France submitted a working paper that sort of broadly on the topic of risk reduction, and it included the issue of maintaining human control, again, for all actions critical to informing and executing nuclear weapons employment. So that was another signal that that topic is coming back in conversations at different levels. And then most recently, the Stockholm Initiative, which is this cross-regional grouping of states, and it was established to revitalize nuclear disarmament efforts and strengthen the NPT, came out with a working paper for the third PrepCom of the NPT that really outlined the risks and opportunities that these states perceive at the nexus of AI, cyber, space capabilities in the nuclear realm. So I think there's been a slight progression also when you look at side events and sort of civil society engagement on this issue in the NPT context, that there is raising awareness around it. And then I think we have other multilateral processes and initiatives that sort of signal that this is not going away. And again, human control seems to be I think the focus area at the moment, which was we saw the bilateral statement between Biden and Xi in 2024, also pledging and affirming the need to maintain human control. There was the blueprint for action from the RE-AIM summits in 2024 that both stressed the need to prevent AI from basically leading to WMD proliferation, and then again, human control. And then I think sort of adjacent to the NPT process, we have the Creating an Environment for Nuclear Disarmament Initiative, CND, that also started integrating AI nuclear conversations into their working groups. And I think what's important about that is that the NPT obviously has is almost universal in membership, but it does not include all nuclear weapon states, and the CND at least also has Pakistan, India, and Israel as members. So I think it's sort of a more inclusive process. To the key challenges, really briefly, that I see in terms of addressing the AI nuclear nexus in multilateral processes, I think they can be grouped in sort of two categories. One of them is political and institutional. The other is technological and more structural in nature. So on the political and institutional side, I think, again, particularly within the NPT, we have an almost universal membership, but we operate on consensus in this treaty regime, and so introducing a technologically complex and sort of fast-moving topic in this process, I think, can also create challenges in terms of reaching consensus and making agreement even harder. So I think it's just something to keep in mind once you introduce new subjects onto an agenda that is already fairly packed. Can produce some challenges as well. And then, again, as I said, exclusion of some key players. The NPT does not India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea are not members, and so are outside that treaty regime. So any norms that could be developed in that process risk being selective, and there needs to be sort of careful framing around that and making sure that these norms sort of go beyond the NPT. And then really briefly on the technological and structural side, I think your point about sort of the race of developing these technologies, when you pair that with the already full packed agenda of delegations, capacity, and sort of resource constraints, AI is developing faster than any multilateral negotiation can really match that. And I think there's also an asymmetry in knowledge, right, for delegations. So not every delegate and diplomat is an AI expert, and not every AI expert is a nuclear strategist, so to speak. So I think it's different languages almost that are coming together in these processes, especially if the private sector that has been at the forefront of pushing this innovation is not, has not been historically part of multilateral, I think, nuclear treaty regimes to a certain extent, and so needs to be better integrated into these conversations. And then generally the geopolitical environment right now, which is shaped and characterized by, confrontation and competition and sort of this parallel race to maintain a strategic advantage and edge on emerging technologies and AI, makes it really difficult if you pair it with sensitive technologies, nuclear command and control systems as well. So I think the most substantive conversations that we have seen on AI and nuclear have taken place so far on the bilateral level, sort of in track 1.5 and 2 dialogues between experts, and then sort of in the broader community, and they just start to emerge. There are a couple of opportunities as well. I think NOR building is really important. So to the extent that we can, start with human control issues, despite, I think, the limitations of that concept as well, it's important to do so. And Mexico, for example, in First Committee has been, a vocal advocate of that. To the extent that we can try and integrate expertise, private sector, industry into these multilateral processes, that's really important as well. And I think to a certain extent, it's an issue that has the potential to maybe be compartmentalized from the broader geopolitical situation, because if you look at what, states' existential interests are, I think there is an interest of, at least on the human control issue, to make sure that nuclear weapons are not launched by an AI, even though that's, not the only scenario, of course. So there is, I think, some overlap in interests. Just a concluding sentence, I think in terms of multilateral processes, finding the right forums for having the right conversations will be crucial, and not every venue can have the same type and depth of conversation on sort of these nexus issues. So I think it must be more of a layered approach to find the right places to have certain conversations.
Thank you. Would anyone on the panel like to comment? Okay, it's good because we're running a little bit behind time. So our next speaker is Mrs. Erika Campos. She's a diplomat from the Permanent Delegation of Brazil to the UN, and she's an expert on disarmament. So, Ms. Campos, as we think about these emerging challenges, how can non-nuclear weapon states and diverse regional perspectives be better included in shaping the global debates? And are there any examples of creative or out-of-the-box approaches that could inspire more effective and inclusive policymaking?
Thank you. Thank you, UNODA, for organizing this event. It's always a pleasure to connect and exchange ideas with a younger audience. And I also commend the choice of the topic. As the panelists mentioned, it's been broadly discussed through this year's first committee. And, we have 2 resolutions directly linked to artificial intelligence now. and it looks like that we will continue to have a heavy interest on this in the future. It's an ongoing discussion that we don't see being exhausted in a very long time in the future. So artificial intelligence is indeed transforming every aspect of our societies, including the military domain. Its potential to accelerate decision-making and enhance situation awareness comes with profound risks when applied to nuclear weapons. And the combination of AI and nuclear capabilities could compress reaction times, blur human accountability, and expose critical systems to new vulnerabilities. So we are in many ways opening a new chapter in the history of strategic stability, one that demands collective vigilance and shared responsibility. It also calls for political and legal commitment to security of all countries. So for Brazil, a country firmly committed to nuclear disarmament and to the exclusively peaceful use of nuclear energy, these developments must be examined through the lens of risk reduction. That is, the prevention of a nuclear incident that leads to escalation or unauthorized launches, and through the lens of the implementation of the disarmament obligation. So AI should never amplify nuclear danger, and it should at most help us make this possibility to disappear. So we are concerned about the prospects of incorporating AI systems into nuclear command, control, and communications, NC3, because even partial automation of these functions, from early warning analysis to decision support, carries unacceptable dangers. Complex algorithms are prone to bias, adversarial manipulation, and opaque reasoning. When seconds count, an error or a spoofed signal could precipitate catastrophe. So the history of near misses in nuclear age, caused by false alarms, sensor malfunctions, or misinterpretations, already offer sobering lessons. So adding layers of machine autonomy would not make the systems safer, it would make them more brittle. It is therefore essential to reaffirm a simple but powerful principle that decisions regarding nuclear weapons must remain under exclusive human control. This principle should be anchored in doctrines, national legislations, operational safeguards, and not only left to good intentions alone. So Brazil believes that non-nuclear weapon states have a crucial role to play in shaping this debate. That the risks of artificial intelligence in the nuclear field are not confined to those who possess such weapons, because enemies' use or malfunction would have global consequences. So non-nuclear weapon states bring to the table perspectives rooted in prevention and in the normative frameworks that already constrain nuclear dangers. Through the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, we have collectively recognized that all countries have an obligation to engage in effective measures to seize the nuclear arms race. And the NPT remains a cornerstone of our efforts. Discussions on AI and nuclear stability add a new layer to this discussion and to these efforts. So incorporating AI into nuclear decisions chains risks undermining the disarmament pillar by entrenching new justifications for deterrence modernization. And as mentioned by Patricia, that we had this discussion for the final session of the 2022 RevCom of the NPT. And I believe that after the briefing of the appointed chair of the NPT for next year, I believe that we'll also have something very strong in this regard in the next RevCom. So The other forum that for us is quite important are the nuclear weapon-free zones, including the Treaty of Tlatelolco, to which Brazil proudly belongs, that already demonstrate that regional arrangements can advance global objectives. They provide both legal and political frameworks for restraint, verification, and cooperation. These zones can now become laboratories for responsible innovation. Regions free of nuclear weapons can also champion principles for responsible military use of AI, including commitments to human control and prohibitions on AI systems that could enable nuclear escalation. The further coordination among zones could offer a platform to exchange experiences and propose norms at the global level, notably here in the UN. To ensure that risks do not increase, we must act on several fronts. First, promote transparency and confidence building. States should exchange information on doctrines, test policies for AI-enabled military systems, and declare that no AI application will be used in command, control, and communication of nuclear weapons systems. Second, enhance multilateral participation. Expert groups, standard bodies, and dialogues on AI safety must include balanced representation of regions and of non-nuclear weapon states. Technological governance cannot be left to a few advanced actors. And third, invest in education and capacity building. Developing countries need access to the knowledge and the tools that allow them to assess risk, test systems, and contribute to setting the norms. This is not only a question of fairness, it is a question of effectiveness. And finally, Brazil encourages all states to engage constructively in these ongoing multilateral efforts to govern the military applications of emerging technologies, including within the United Nations. The goal must be to prevent destabilization, to prevent the integrity of existing norms on the nuclear field, and to advance not reverse the cause of disarmament. In this regard, Brazil and Norway are proposing this year a resolution on to create a technical and scientific expert group on nuclear disarmament verification. It's not directly related to the topic here, artificial intelligence, but of course we believe that the application of AI in this field as well could be one of the topics of discussion for the experts, for the scientists to advance the exchange on nuclear disarmament verification. So finally, artificial intelligence should never become a new justification for the indefinite retention of nuclear weapons. Instead, it should remind us that human judgment, caution, and cooperation remain irreplaceable, and that we share the ultimate goal of complete, irreversible, and verifiable nuclear disarmament. So in this new technological era, our collective task is to ensure that innovation serves humanity and not the other way around. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campos. If there's no comments from the panel, I'd like to go to our last speaker, Mr. Leonard Gunsel, PhD candidate at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, where he researches artificial intelligence in underwater robotics. And he was also a participant in UNODA's project on the responsible and peaceful use of emerging autonomous technologies. So, Leo, many engineers working on AI or autonomous systems in defense context are trained to think in terms of optimization and capability and not in consequences. So from your perspective, how does the way we educate engineers affect the development of technologies that could destabilize nuclear or strategic systems?
Let me see if I'm capable of using the microphone. Thank you for the introduction. I would like to, because underwater robotics always raises some eyebrows. So basically, we try to build robots that roam and explore our oceans. And I try today to speak as an engineer in this field about the role of engineers. And when I think about this, I come down to 3 steps, which is easy to remember. that build up on each other. Number one is responsible education. Number two is that we need to establish a better discussion culture in engineering. And number three is that engineers can be the first line of defense against unresponsible technology development. So when I say this, especially step one, responsible education, and I talk to policy people, they are often surprised how absent ethical education is in engineering diploma. For me, I had to learn about dual use, for example, from exposure. My first contact with that topic was in a civilian research project where we had a defense stakeholder, very common in our field. And over lunch, one of my colleagues told me, well, once this project is over, most likely we'll take it, paint it gray, and sell it to the military. And so this left me asking myself, well, is that right? Should I care? Is it my responsibility to ask this? And then I turned to my fellow students. I reflected with them, and very often the answer would be, well, if you don't do it, someone else will do it. Or you only build it. How they use it, that's up to them. And those are very common arguments, and I think we all can agree they point to a lack of education. And this is not just me and my fellow students in the bachelor's degrees. I now speak in front of labs and working groups that bring up the same arguments, most of which have had no ethical education during their bachelor's, master's, and sometimes not even PhDs. And that brings me to the second step, where we speak about discussion culture, especially in the department. There's this concept that Aaron Eitzech, a researcher in engineering education, formulates as the culture of disengagement. So basically, as students progress through their education, they become less interested in societal issues. So you could phrase it the other way around. They leave with less interest in societal issues than when they started. So now, my personal belief is that engineering should be about finding technical solution for societal issues. And that we need to display to our students. We have to put society at the center of our education. And I think when we have achieved that, we can look to step three, which is the first line of defense. Because before, which was mentioned on the panel a few times, innovation happened close to the government. It was easy to regulate. Now we have civil society pushing forward way faster than regulation and policy can keep up, putting us engineers in a gray area without guide rails. And especially in times where it is hard to find international consensus, it might be worth thinking about not only a top-to-bottom approach, but maybe a bottom-up approach in parallel, where we as engineers take more responsibility for the development. So when I speak to my colleagues, I say, well, first of all, we have to make engaging ethics seminar that we teach ourselves. We can't outsource this. We have to show to our students that we are interested in this. We have to respect and support our peers, which very often produce highly cited and impactful work, but it is still regarded as second-class technical work. And third, we have to engage in a discussion on responsibility as a whole in our societies. But today I'm in front of you as what I consider policymakers, so I have requests for you too. Number one, give us a space at the table. Consider especially young academics that might come with less financial interest than our industry counterparts. And to make something very specific, we have the panel on AI. Will that feature a youth participant seat? Number two, I believe that if we have more tech in the chain of commands, we need to hold the system and the builders accountable. And number three, I believe research needs to stay open and beneficial for the global society, but we also have to make sure that it doesn't fall in the wrong hands. And this is where we need the expertise from the disarmament and non-proliferation community to tell us how we can ensure this.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the panel? If not, of course.
Just one comment on this. Actually, my colleague Charlie Oving has been working on this issue with STEM students for the last 2 years with an EU-funded project. So I completely agree with you in your remarks on this, to approach the STEM students to academia in order to actually raise awareness, but also the knowledge of how to defend and how to be more responsible when it comes to developing and design of AI applications. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to all the panelists for the very insightful presentations. So now we'd like to open the floor for questions. So when called, please state your name and your affiliation, and please try and keep it brief and ask just one clear question. Are there any questions? Yes.
I don't think the mic works. I'll try to project my voice a bit louder. Yeah. Oh, yes, okay. Thank you. My name is Jun Beck. I'm co-founder of Youth4Privacy and also participating in the Y4D forum. The one question I have is about verification, which you briefly mentioned. And it is a thing that I've been trying to figure out and trying to like wrap my head around as an engineer myself on how do we actually make sure that when a country says that we're not going to use AI in our AI decision-making chain, for example, how do we make sure, how do we like hold them accountable on that? Like the nuclear decision-making process already is very opaque. And with the AI as an element to that, like, is there a way that we could actually even verify it? Is there a way we could even get started in verifying it? Or what are some methods that we could try to like do those kind of accountability measures? And the second question I have is that when it comes to engineering education, like, you know, like I do agree with that. Like my years is 4 years working as an engineer, like only ethics related thing that I did was that when the company orientation, there was like a 30-minute session on ethics and that was about it. But in a lot of these private enterprises where they make the latest AI models and latest AI capabilities, always it's been on financial interest. And even if you are trying to be ethical and try to speak up, you are penalized, let's say, by having less promotions or being likely to get laid off or having some retributions and punishments. So in those kind of cases, like what are some ways where we could systematically allow engineers to be ethical in their companies and in their universities and still make sure that they're not facing retribution? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Oh, before we answer, I'll try to take a few questions at a time. If there's any, yeah, please.
Just speaking of the technical guide rails that could exist, what are the possibilities? Are there already some ideas in the field to securitize that, such as AI exclusion protocols hard-coded into launch systems? Is that something that is being considered with these sort of innovations? Are there already technical solutions that are being considered at the moment?
Maybe one last question, if any. Okay, then I'll let the panelists answer those three questions.
I brought up the verification point. Yeah, because I thought someone else would. Why wouldn't I just mention it from the get-go? We don't have an answer on the verification question. It's a technical answer. I think I would be looking at the technical community rather than the policy community to come up with answers. One point that I was just thinking as I hear you is, and this is not the right answer, but just like brainstorming about it, is from the design stage, when we are designing AI systems, for instance, can we think about coding principles where we say, okay, if you are to come across with a specific application that's only known to be used for nuclear weapon systems, right? Like I mentioned about permissive action links. To my knowledge, PALs are used only for nuclear weapon systems. If you come across to those type of like networks or links and so on, do the action of self-destruct or do X, Y, Z. Can it be possible to think it in that way? That's limited because it's only limited to the links and networks or systems that would be specifically for nuclear weapon systems. That would not, for instance, if you're thinking about systems that are used, SCADA systems, right? They are used in critical infrastructure, but they're also used, they could be used in some notions on the nuclear weapons work. So you cannot do that, because then the AI may not be able to differentiate whether it's actually looking at an energy grid or whether it's being integrated into a nuclear weapon type system. So partial answer, perhaps. It's just the brainstorming that I just came about right now. But the technical community is really looking at those elements in terms of self-destruct as being an example, or a secure by design type of strategies on the cyber side. Can we think about that application for AI, for instance? What would that look like? You know, we need that brainstorming. And I would love to sit on those discussions. You know, I don't come from the technical side, I don't come from the engineering side, but sitting with the engineering and the technical people gives me the idea of how can I then think about that from the policy side, right? So we need that building bridge between the two communities.
I think I would do better at this. I think that's beautiful points. I think I would also go the other way around. So I think currently we see in the US that a lot of the AI companies are interested in military contracts, and something that is in audit is now whether they can live up to the regulations that the US usually has to AI software systems. So you, for example, need to know who coded on the system. And now the question is, well, in the context of AI and things that train on large data, someone else has labeled that data. So one could argue that if you just stick with the regulation you have, you will most likely not find AI in any product, military product. So most likely we will see that the regulation will slightly bend, but I think there's also basically the other way around, saying, okay, I think the policy domain has a lot of power there to impose certain rules on engineers. And to the second question of like, okay, yeah, it is difficult to speak up. I think we have kind of lost the power of unions. I think we have to kind of revisit that. One kind of maybe good example was with OpenAI, where we saw a huge is too much. We saw a change in the leading circle after they stepped away from some of their responsible guidelines. I think, for example, to highlight something, Ludovic Rigretti from NYU here is starting a responsible robotics group in IEEE. So I think if we come together under these kind of umbrellas, we are more protected.
Just very quickly, a couple of points. I think on the research ethics part, I think there is a wider reflection to be made around the entire kind of research and development ecosystem that goes, of course, to those on the front line doing the research, the PhD students, the postgrad, etc. But it goes all the way up, if you want, the food chain. I think that those, for example, that do the review for papers that have to be published in journals also have to be educated and highlight potential risks deriving from the research that has been put forward that they've been asked to review. So that's why I mean, we really need a wider reflection and adaptation of the entire kind of research ecosystem to make sure that these potential ethical concerns or dual use risks are really highlighted early on. That is one point. The second point, I think, on the issue about what are the incentives, like how can we provide enough incentives to the technology developers to actually do, quote unquote, the right thing if the right thing exists. And I think that's where, I'm just going to draw a parallel that is not too far from what we're trying to achieve here. If we go back in the early days of cybersecurity, where cybersecurity was for many years considered a cost line that had to be minimized as much as possible, particularly for certain startups and industries in order to keep the price competitive. And what we've seen that with time, the first cybersecurity standards started to approach. And they started as voluntary measures, but then states were like, wait a minute, if we make those adherence to those voluntary standards, we make them a requirement to enter our own procurement processes. Now, they might not be codified as a law, but we're giving a competitive advantage to those companies that abide by those standards. So I think that while governments might not be able to design a solution that addresses in technical terms what does responsible AI mean, they can definitely provide an incentive to industry by making responsible AI in the way that they can define, that the way that is being, there are some emerging standards on what responsible AI could mean, at least in terms of processes. They can adopt those processes and make them a requirement, basically closing off the market to those companies that do not provide sufficient evidence that they follow those rules. So that's just an example.
Would anyone else on the panel like to? Yeah.
The sort of the technological question, and it's not a cooperative measure by any means, but it's something that's called fail-safe review. So the Nuclear Threat Initiative, my organization, has been advocating for every nuclear weapons state as they modernize the nuclear weapons system to sort of review their command, control, and communication structures to make sure that the systems function well and sort of to prevent like inadvertent, accidental nuclear use. And this is especially important, I think, since some of these questions of integration of AI and other technologies in the systems come up as like nuclear weapon states modernize. And so Congress in the U.S. mandated this study. It's been finalized. It's classified. So unfortunately, the results of that are not public. But my organization, at least, is advocating that this is something that every nuclear weapon states could do unilaterally. So it's doable even in an environment that is so fraught with competition and confrontation. But it's sort of strengthening safeguards, at least in your own nuclear weapon system, whether they're technical or related sort of to the human aspects of the system. To at least prevent accidental use and something that these systems could potentially, vulnerabilities that they could produce. So fail-safe reviews is sort of the key word that we've been working on to sort of advocate that internationally.
Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yeah.
Gonna give this a minute. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your insights. I think the panel here represents the holistic communities who work around tech. There's academia, there's tech representation, there's state representation, there's intergovernmental organizations. My approach comes from more of a big picture approach around this. We know that silos are the enemy of progress when we talk about policy and governance around tech. And we've heard a lot about how it's very important to involve all aspects on all cogs of the wheel in this progress. I'm wondering if the panel has any practical, actionable solutions in terms of making sure that we're working as a network of networks and not in our separate groups and bubbles of practice, to make sure that we're coming across with solutions that are real, meaningful, and long-lasting, sustainable enough to survive the constant ups and downs that we see in the tech space, especially around AI and cyber. Thank you.
Okay, we can take one more question. Okay.
Just in addition to what she's asking, I had a bit of an opportunity to work with startups in China, just understanding developers' perspectives when it comes to designing tech and what human-centered practices they put in place. One thing that really stood out was they mentioned about how the research teams and the developer teams often don't speak the same language, and when they communicate, so much is lost in translation. So just as researchers right here and some of the developers here, I wonder what kind of conversations you have amongst yourselves and whether you feel like you are really communicating, understanding each other? And if so, there are some practices we can put in place to ensure that the language is more seamless or more understanding to avoid loss of information translation. Thank you.
I'll let the panel answer. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll start quickly with the second question, then I'll come. Shimon, excellent question, Shimon. No, just kidding. So I think the issue of language is very important here, because there are two elements: is two communities or three communities that use different language to mean the same thing. That's one problem. It's just that, potato, potato. But there is also for me, more concerning issue when the word is the same, or the concept is the same, but the meaning that is given to that word is different in one community or the other. Because you think you're on the same page, but then when you go digging, you realize you're actually not. So in that respect, at Unidear, we've been doing a lot of work in the tech field in trying to provide taxonomies or tools or instruments that can in a way facilitate interaction between different communities. They might not be necessarily 100% accurate from a technical perspective or 100% accurate from a policy perspective, but they sit right in the middle and they facilitate that exchange. That is not always possible, though, because and a great example is what our colleagues from the Outer Space program are looking at. They have developed a living document, what they call it the lexicon, which basically tries to bring together all of the different interpretations and views that exist of specific concepts. Because at least if you cannot agree, if you cannot find consensus on a specific definition, the second best is that at least we all know what we mean when we're talking about something. So that are very practical tools that can really facilitate. And this is even before you start looking at different languages. The example that everyone can relate to, the distinction that in English exists between safety and security, in many languages doesn't exist because it's one word. In Italian is one word, and in many other languages is one word. So having that kind of ability to understand each other is very good. And to Shimona's point, I think there has to be space for both. There has to be space for quote-unquote silos, because that's where in the areas of specialty you can go deep, but then these silos, they have to come together at some point, and there needs to be coordination to make sure that at least they exchange notes and we're going into somewhat of a coherent direction. I think that there isn't really the chance to have an all-inclusive debate that also goes deep. So you kind of have to balance it out, and rather than finding something that kind of is in the middle and doesn't do neither things well, perhaps maintain the silos of excellence, but coordinate them in a coherent way.
Anyone else on the panel like to answer? No.
Hopeful sign on the educational part is that I've noticed that especially when it comes to next gen in the nuclear field, I've seen some new programs come up that that bring nuclear professionals, especially younger people, together with more of a technical audience, and sort of the first sign of getting together. Like, there are some fellowships that keep popping up recently, which I thought was really positive, because the language barrier, so to speak, when it comes to technical terms and the nuclear field is so big. And so I agree. I think there's hope to be had there as well, that there are some early signs of approachment.
Thank you. If there's no more comments from the panel, I'd like to conclude the Q&A. But before we conclude the panel session, I would like to ask each panelist to sum up in just one sentence their main takeaway or their main message to this audience. Would anyone like to start?
It's not a message probably, but it's been a long time that I haven't had such thoughtful conversations where we are brainstorming. And I think that is thanks to the value of youth and young participants here asking questions that make us think about issues that we do not always think in our day-to-day work. And I would say that we need more of that. So my message is we need to do more of these activities with different communities coming together and young people sitting at the center of that. So that we could then borrow some of these discussions to the policy side in the long run as well.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it was very useful to hear from you, especially the people that work rather on the technical field, and from the point of view of a diplomat that has been following many discussions on this, and sometimes you get out of the room without any hope that things will improve. But I would like to provide some a positive note that having the NPT conference in the future, I think that we would be able to further explore the debate on transparency and accountability. And I think that this is a very important aspect for us to bring this AI discussion on the table. Because as you know, the system does not provide many safeguards when we are talking about nuclear weapon states. But we need to have more transparency and accountability. And these discussions, they force them somehow to consider this. To improve the way their systems are transparent and accountable. So I think that given the level of risk that we're facing now, this kind of discussion, bringing inputs from academia, from industry, is very important to somehow depoliticize the conversation and having a rather technical color in these discussions. I think it's useful, especially in a moment that every discussion is very politicized and polarized. So I think this is positive. It gives us ideas on how to move on the conversation on nuclear disarmament. And from the political side, we need to continue to work with these elements and try to achieve improvements in the way we deal with this in the multilateral settings. And for the non-nuclear weapon states, this is even more important because we don't have the hard power to put on the table, but we have the power of the argument and the support of the community. So thank you very much for that.
Giacomo, you need to do so, please.
Sorry for jumping the line. I have to go to another event in 5 minutes. If I have one concept I want you to live with is that, so AI is probably going to be the technology that will define your generation. And I do invite you to consider yourself part of the solution. You are the solution. If someone is going to come up with either a technical or a policy solution to artificial intelligence, it's you. So be engaged, care, study, document yourself. Don't trust anyone here on the panel. Do your own research and really be part of the solution and be engaged. Because, similarly to what diplomats had to do 20, 30, 40 years ago, dealing with technology that at the time looked futuristic, this is now AI for you. So this is your problem to solve. We'll help, but we're old. This is your problem to solve. So do take note and engage.
One sentence. I believe we need responsibility. Responsibility needs to be the default in engineering education, and accountability the norm when we deploy autonomous military systems.
Very worried about the nexus between AI and nuclear, and this is why we're here today. And I think that we are all in agreement that humans must remain in control, and that all decisions that decide the fate of humanity should be retained by humans. And different communities from different backgrounds must all enter into dialogue more often, and this is why a place like this is very important, and why member states should also work towards providing such platforms, and about also recognizing that for youth, it's not just about being included in a conversation, but more about recognizing that this conversation already belongs to us. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say, for me, it's a quote that I usually start my presentations with, but it's actually a good sort of summary to why this is so important that we're having this discussion. It's because, especially at the nexus of nuclear weapons and these new technologies, like the fact that nuclear weapons haven't been used in 80 years, it's not an inherently permanent achievement. Like, it actually is it's a condition, it's our status quo for now, but it needs to be secured by, you know, generations of leaders into the future. And so we cannot really afford to be complacent around these risks. And so I would just encourage all of you to stay engaged, especially at the nexus of these subjects with these, you know, existential risks converging. And yeah, I think it's great that there's a place to have these dialogues.
Thank you very much to all the panelists, and thank you to the audience for the very thoughtful questions. We've covered quite a lot of ground today, but the discussion doesn't end here. So tomorrow at 1:15 in this room, we are hosting a side event to present the Youth4Disarmament outcome documents. So I encourage you all to attend and to engage with the documents, and to think about how its recommendations can be translated into concrete action. So a round of applause to all the panelists for their insights, and thank you to all for your thoughtful participation.